Welcome to Crimeroom, a true crime podcast. I'm the speaker, and my name is X. It doesn't matter who I am, it only matters what they did. Join us. Enter the room.
Crimeroom is designed for mature audiences and is unsuitable for young or sensitive listeners. Discretion is strongly advised.
Elli Perkins was born in 1959 in Rochester, New York, to a Jewish family. She was a popular person amongst her friends and loved ones. She loved glass painting, and her passion was to sell painted glass as a career. During her soul-searching period, Elli read a lot of books, but she finally found what seemed to be the ultimate route to self-improvement when she stumbled upon L. Ron Hubbard's book about Scientology philosophy. Elli felt like the Scientology courses she began to take helped calm her down and made it easier for her to talk to people about her art without being afraid. Her loved ones aren't exactly sure how she was introduced to the Scientology church, but today the church often recruits new members with the free personality test or a stress test. Church members use a device called an E-meter to determine what's troubling you. The E-meter measures the body's resistance to electrical current. They'll say, "Oh look, the E-meter moved when I asked you this. This means you're stressed. Come on in and we'll help you out." Much like lie detectors police use in eyewitness testimonies and interrogations. Elli met her husband Don during one of these courses. At the time, Don worked as a local carpenter, and before long, the couple had 2 children together. Jeremy in 1975 and Danielle in 1976. But Elli's financial and artistic struggles remained. Back in those days, Elli wasn't selling a lot of art and business was going downhill. With young children and tight finances, life was difficult for Elli and Don Perkins. Elli wanted to find a business that was both financially rewarding and creatively fulfilling. All she wanted to do was paint, but being a mother to 2 young children at the same time was no easy task. She found her solution when a friend introduced her to glass painting, and when that friend conveniently left town, it left an opportunity open to the enterprising young Perkins. Almost instantly, the couple began to create thousands of miniature objects in a small flat they rented in Rochester, New York. Having less competition made it so much easier for Elli to focus on her growing career as an artist while remaining a devoted mother to her children, Danielle and Jeremy. Don and Elli eventually reached the state of spiritual advancement known by the Church of Scientology as clear. Going clear meant that they were now allowed to operate the E-meter, and by doing so, Elli became a respected auditor, a type of counsellor and higher-level Scientologist who takes on a member that hasn't yet reached the stage of clear to rid them of negative energies. During the 1980s, the family temporarily lived in California, where Elli was allowed to work at one of Scientology's most prestigious facilities, the Celebrity Center in Los Angeles. In the organization's early years, L. Ron Hubbard made it a priority to recruit celebrities because he believed they could be the face of the church to the public and give the church a good name. Certain celebrities, such as Tom Cruise and John Travolta, became targeted just for that. Jeremy Perkins was often described as a kind, gentle and sweet person who always respected and loved his parents very much. Jeremy had a friendly and easygoing, even timid demeanour. He was artistically inclined, like his mother Elli, a glass painter who painted scenes of plants and rural life. Jeremy also had some learning problems that caused him to repeat the first grade. He later dropped out of Williamsville North High School. Jeremy enjoyed playing the drums, sometimes practicing with a couple of friends. They had a band together, and Jeremy was very serious about wanting to become a professional drummer with his rock group. Ron Epstein, a next-door neighbour and close friend to Jeremy, said that Jeremy had been taken to 3 hospitals in a short time span for he received psychiatric evaluation at Buffalo General Hospital, in Erie County Medical Centre, and Millard Fillmore Suburban Hospital's emergency room. Even though Elli Perkins and her husband Don had been aware of their son's schizophrenia for some time, they had refused to seek out help from mental health professionals. The Perkins family were devout Scientologists who followed L. Ron Hubbard's beliefs and teachings. Like many other Scientologists, Elli believed that psychiatrists and psychologists were part of a known conspiracy and who were responsible for the Nazi Holocaust. Jeremy was 24 years old when his behaviour began to drastically change. At one point, he told his father that he was hearing voices in his head. It was during this time when Jeremy was sent to join Scientology's Sea Org branch in California. Jeremy signed a Sea Org contract and flew out to LA to enter the Sea Organisation, whose members were Scientology's most elite order and who dedicate themselves to working for the Church of Scientology over multiple lifetimes. They are required to sign contracts for the next 1 billion years. On May 13th, 2001, Jeremy filed a so-called knowledge report on Fred Lennox, a fellow Scientologist, complaining that Fred hadn't shown up for his Scientology coursework. A knowledge report is a statement written about your partner to identify issues which could cause a problem for the church. Fred and Jeremy were twins on the course, meaning they were supposed to do paired Scientology exercises with each other. His parents believed that the Sea Org would help him work through his issues and make his troubling behaviour go away. Unfortunately, joining the Sea Org didn't work out for Jeremy, so after 3 months he was rejected and sent back home due to his mental health issues. On August 14th, 2001, Jeremy was arrested for trespassing outside the University of Buffalo. It was then that a psychiatric exam confirmed he suffered from schizophrenia, and doctors sent him to a local hospital. Jeremy's parents had him released back into their custody, but still refused to let their son take antipsychotic medications, going against the recommendation of professionals. Because Elli so strongly believed that psychiatry didn't work, Jeremy's schizophrenia remained untreated. His illness became so severe that in the summer of 2002, his own father had to fire him from work. In early 2002, Jeremy injured his head by hitting it off a truck door while working with his father at his father's carpenting business. The Church of Scientology decided the incident seemed to worsen his mental state, and other members were told not to talk about Jeremy. Anybody who asked after him was told that it's none of your business. As Jeremy's condition got a lot worse, the best Scientologists could offer was to give him more work to do in attempts to keep him busy, until he could return to their natural healer for residential treatment. When Jeremy was told to pack his things, he became agitated. His psychiatrist explained that, in his condition, he found unfamiliar environments very threatening and that the prospect of moving would aggravate his symptoms. His mother was already the focus of Jeremy's resentment, and delusions began to develop when she insisted Jeremy took his vitamins. Scientologists believe that purification rundown is a method that would help a person rid themselves of the harmful effect of drugs and other chemicals in the body, which become a barrier to spiritual well-being. While Jeremy still wasn't receiving the help he needed, the Church of Scientology decided to classify him as a level 3 potential source of trouble, which meant that Jeremy was banned from attending any more Scientology courses. It was the Perkins defense attorney and fellow Scientologist, Dr. Conrad Malfair, who had convinced Elli that regular vitamins would help him purge his body of the toxins which kept him from being energized and returning to his true self. In early 2003, when Jeremy was 28 years old, his parents sent him to stay with a man named Albert Brown, who owned a facility in Springville, New York. This facility was a farm where Mr. Brown took people in when they needed respite and to get away from stressful situations for a few days. Albert Brown was not a Scientologist and had no medical training. He had simply agreed to use the Scientology handbook if Jeremy got out of hand. Mr. Brown had never met Scientologists before, and this would be his first experience with them. Jeremy was supposed to arrive on the evening of March 13, 2003. Mr. Brown's practices were generally accepted within the church, and even Jeremy himself agreed that Brown could help him. On the same day as he was scheduled to leave, Jeremy had gotten into a serious argument with his mother, so Don Perkins, Jeremy's father, left work early to help settle the fight. When the tension between Jeremy and his mother decreased, Don left to go back to work and Jeremy was sent to take a shower and cool off. Between 9:45 and 10:15 in the morning, Elli Perkins was on the phone with her best friend of 30 years, a female Scientology public, what the church called their parishioners, of the Buffalo org. Jeremy came out of the shower and at first proceeded to pack his things to leave for the farm as planned. But then something changed his mind. Instead of packing, Jeremy stopped in the hallway, watched his mother talking on the phone, then got a 12-inch knife from a drawer in the kitchen. He flew into a rage and suddenly began stabbing her while pushing her into her bedroom, where he continued the armed assault. Jeremy would later claim he had tried to slit his wrists after his shower, but he couldn't do it, so he decided to attack his mother instead. She was screaming, "No, Jeremy, don't," but he stabbed her around 4 to 5 times before she fell down. Then he stabbed her around 10 more times in the stomach after she fell lifeless to the ground. He knew then that she was dead. Jeremy believed that he'd lived many different lives for the past thousands of years. He was in a state of complete delusion. The woman who had been on the phone to Jeremy's mother had heard the entire attack and called the police and the Buffalo Scientology organisation. At 10:30 a.m, the police arrived to interview Jeremy, and at 1:30 p.m, he gave them a written statement and signed search waivers for his person, clothing, and bedroom. Later that afternoon, the Scientologist public who was on the phone with Elli when she was killed was contacted by Office of Special Affairs staff from New York City and told her not to talk to any reporters but to cooperate with the police when they arrived to interview her. At 6 p.m. that evening, a 5 to 7 person crisis management team from New York City flew into Buffalo to orchestrate the cover-up. One was Pam Valinsky from the New York org, an Office of Special Affairs, and another was a man named Manalfi, who was a Class 12 auditor and Scientology minister. 2 men from Florida also flew up, both operating Thetan auditors. They were brought in to handle Don, Jeremy's father, right there in the org. The officer who arrived at the crime scene, Edward Monin, interviewed Jeremy for an hour and a half after his arrest. Jeremy told Monin and his colleagues that he, in his words, did her in, and explained how he stabbed his mother 15 times and then continued to stab her another 25 to 30 times once he realised she was dead. When the officers questioned Jeremy about his mother, he became visibly upset. Ironically, Elli allowed Jeremy to take a sleeping pill prescription, but this only antagonised his symptoms. Previous to the assault on his mother, one night, Jeremy went out walking and became aggressive towards strangers. He was arrested for assaulting a number of people. Court-ordered psychiatric evaluations confirmed that Jeremy was a schizophrenic. Elli assured the court she would take her son to a psychiatrist, although she never did. This would prove to be a fatal mistake. There was never any doubt about who was responsible for the murder of Elli Perkins on the 13th of March 2003. She was found dead on her bedroom floor, having been stabbed 77 times in total with a 12-inch kitchen knife. The perpetrator was none other than her own son, Jeremy Perkins. Even though Jeremy admitted to his own crime, he wasn't held responsible in the eyes of the law. On the 29th of July 2002, Jeremy Perkins was found not criminally responsible by reason of mental disorder. He was placed on probation, but 6 months later, on the 29th of January 2004, the New York State Office of Mental Health issued a commitment order which deemed him to be dangerously mentally ill, and he was committed to a secure facility where he could be supervised. Dr. Conrad G. Malfair, Jr. is a doctor of osteopathic medicine and also a known Scientologist. He is the one who originally diagnosed Jeremy Perkins by using hair analysis and recommended that he called an expensive intravenous therapy, which he felt Jeremy needed to remove arsenic and toxic metals from his system. Dr. Malfair was a man whom the Perkins family trusted. This was a man that they trusted to advise them on their son's health and well-being. This was also a man that strongly opposed psychiatric care, even for the very disorder that Jeremy suffered from. Dr. Malfair is still on the board of advisors for the Citizens Commission for Human Rights, who are a Scientology group opposed to psychiatric care. The CCHR spends a great deal of time creating emotionally charged and arguably misleading reports on the harmful effects psychiatric treatment has on its patients. During Jeremy's trial, Malfair denied any involvement in the treatment of Jeremy. Malfair also refused to make any further comments about the case and his involvement with the Perkins family. Despite all of this, Dr. Malfair does admit that he did consult Jeremy Perkins because the family had asked him to, but insists he never saw Jeremy as one of his own patients because, just like the church, he wanted to distance himself from the Perkins family and not taint his own name. Buffalo's deputy director of Scientology admitted that there was a panic amongst the church leaders after Elli Perkins' murder. There was an elaborate scheme put in place to make sure the church could not be held accountable in any way, and that Jeremy Perkins' name would not drag the church into the media spotlight. If it had, it could have exposed some of the dangers of Scientology, revealing the church's own beliefs and attitudes towards mental health professionals. The deputy director, Rich Dunning, explained that Jeremy's crime brought unwanted attention to Scientology and its leaders, who worked hard to keep some of their practices behind closed doors. However, Jeremy himself later admitted that he had received the appropriate treatment and taken the correct medications issued by psychiatrists. The murder of his mother may never have happened. In October 2006, a CBS 48 Hours program featured the story about Elli Perkins' tragic death and within the program, they stated that Scientology told Elli to treat her son with vitamins instead of getting him psychiatric care. The Church of Scientology were unhappy with this story because it seemed to suggest that Elli Perkins would still be alive if the church hadn't become involved, and that ultimately it was Scientology's fault. Many believe that this case is a perfect example of how dangerous Scientology is. If Jeremy Perkins had received help early on, his mother might still be alive. By the time the Elli Perkins murder hit national headlines, the Church of Scientology decided to distance themselves completely from the case and from the Perkins family themselves. Elli Perkins was an upper-level Scientologist, a so-called operating thetan, and was believed to hold special powers. The church believed and told its members that bad things do not happen to operating thetans and were afraid that Jeremy's act of matricide would prove this theory to be wrong. If lower-ranking church members were made to believe these special powers didn't exist, the whole organisation would collapse. In this instance, the fault seems to lie squarely with the doctrines and practices of the Church of Scientology. Jeremy's parents and the people at the organisation were complicit. They sent him to the Sea Org and ignored his doctor's recommendations, despite his increasingly worrying behaviour. A great deal of the responsibility for the death of Elli and the suffering of Jeremy lies behind the doors of Scientology. 2 days before Jeremy's attack, Elli had called the church to seek help for him, but the church's ethics officer had told Elli to just try and keep him as busy as she could. She'd been told that if she kept him distracted, it would make his delusions go away, and that would make him better. At first, members of the church denied the Buffalo News that Perkins had ever been a Scientologist in the first place, or that she had taken Scientology classes. Later on, though, they admitted she had, in fact, been a member. The murder was a pure nightmare for the church for 2 reasons. It exposed the danger of Scientology's ban on psychiatry, and it punctured their promise that by reaching high operating thetan levels, those who were true believers gained special powers. They were protected. 8 months after the murder, the church had a gala opening of a new centre in Buffalo. Jeremy was unable to attend because he was behind barbed wire and put on anti-psychotic medication. These measures reportedly stabilised him and made him calmer. Through the help of government alliances, the Church of Scientology have become a legitimate organisation. The Buffalo Church of Scientology was able to convince the city and Erie County officials of their innocence in an attempt to escape the reputation of being a cult. Mayor Anthony M. Masiello made the decision to declare the Church of Scientology of Buffalo Day. County jail officials joined church officials in trying to bring a Scientology-related drug program to Erie County Holding Center. The church are known for practicing intimidation and harassment and have a history of using lawsuits to silence critics, using private investigators to spy on them. For Scientologists, L. Ron Hubbard's words are spiritual, and if you follow the church's beliefs, you have to follow his words to the letter. Scientologists believe that the only way to break free from your traumas is to go through a counselling session called auditing, and that's what Elli did. Scientology tells its members that outside life is causing you harm. Your whole life is supposed to revolve around Scientology and nothing else, said Rich Dunning, who was on the local church's staff from October 2001 to May 2003. He then decided to leave the church as he no longer believed in its teachings. Over time, you forget there is an outside world, he said. Scientology promises to lead its members towards enlightenment clear them of harmful substances, and provide them with an all-absorbing community of like-minded believers. One thing Scientology does not do, however, is worship a god. Although it believes in a supreme being, it is not a Christian religion, and it is not related to Christian Science. That lack of a God-centered belief system has led to questions about whether Scientology is truly a religion. The basic philosophical beliefs are religious. There is a Scientologist belief that man is a spiritual being and is basically good, that he can live his life at a higher level of spirituality, and that his relationship with a supreme being is unique and personal and not up to the judgment of others. Rich Dunning explained that they found the staff under constant pressure to rake in money at the Buffalo branch. The focus was always on boosting the weekly stats, which measured the church's performance in such areas as income and memberships. Members of the church are trained to persuade other members to buy expensive courses and one-to-one 2-hour blocks of spiritual counselling or auditing time at the downtown church on Main Street at Virginia Street, just north of the theatre district. The Buffalo branch building, where Elli Perkins and her family worked, is an inviting state-of-the-art facility, gleaming with polished wood, fresh paint and high-tech plasma screens. The Church of Scientology has been in Buffalo since 1967 and has pursued new members and symbols of acceptance from local governments. The nearly 2-story tall main floor includes a room with long desks for reading and studying Scientology texts. From a mezzanine level, members of the church's correction division inform staff below if they spot someone studying incorrectly. Courses such as the one Elli Perkins and her family attended quickly become pricey. They start at a few $dozen and quickly accelerate up to $12,000 and more for high-level courses, or tens of thousands when purchased in packages. It can cost more than $300,000 over a lifetime to climb the church's bridge to total freedom. That's why Scientology attracts successful people and celebrities who have the money to spend. It appears as something exclusive and lures in its members by promises of reaching high levels of spiritual enlightenment and promises a pathway to becoming influential. Family members and friends of Scientologists, including parents, spouses, and children who are critical of the church, can be declared suppressive. That means the church sees them as intent on harming or destroying Scientology. Under strict directives set by L. Ron Hubbard, church members must persuade them to disconnect from their families and loved ones. This is what happened to Jeremy Perkins when higher-ups of the church declared him to be dangerous and wanted nothing to do with him. Despite the controversy and tragedy with the Perkins family, Scientology is still heartily charging forth in its battle against the so-called dark forces of psychiatry and will continue to do so until they win. It's very clear that L. Ron Hubbard believed the medical study and treatment of mental illnesses was something that was a dangerous threat to the pseudo-scientific religion he had created and desperately wanted people to follow. Hubbard was so suspicious and untrusting towards psychiatrists that he almost seemed afraid of them. It's not uncommon within religious cults to call any practices that go against their own beliefs evil because cultists often wish to segregate and isolate their church. Lisa McPherson's death in the mid-1990s is another example of a case where Scientology failed to help one of their members. Just like with Elli Perkins, for many months after Lisa's death, the church attempted to cover up the tragedy by telling her family that she had died of meningitis. They denied any further involvement and avoided any interview questions on the subject. The ensuing lawsuit, which had been instigated by the McPherson family, cost the church thousands of dollars and started a new wave of doubt about the controversial methods of the organisation. Prior to her death, Lisa had been involved in a car crash, which many thought to be a suicide attempt, after which she'd begun to show signs of mental instability. Similar to Jeremy Perkins, the church claimed to help her through introspection rundown, which is a method that involves a period of complete isolation for several days or occasionally weeks. Aside from regular auditing sessions, the person in the rundown doesn't speak at all. The isolation is supposed to encourage a sort of self-evaluation and allow time for the person to fully work through all of the thoughts in their head on their own time, free of distraction. In the case of both Lisa McPherson and Jeremy Perkins, the church's so-called attempts to help did nothing and only caused the matter to get much worse. Their anti-psychiatry views have become a famous controversy across the globe, yet the organisation continues to make profit. It has nearly 8 million members in over 150 countries and continues to grow. While the Church of Scientology is often criticised by many of the world's governments, they've also received a lot of praise for their anti-drug and pro-literacy teachings. Many former members of Scientology, however, talk about the church as a cult, and while Jeremy Perkins' schizophrenia led him to believe his mother was evil, many others believe that the Church of Scientology are the real villains in this tragedy. Thank you for listening to episode 8 of Crime Room. I'm the speaker, and my name is X.
If you enjoy listening to Crime Room, please give the show a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Crime Room is available now on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe for updates when new episodes are released. Sign up to the Crime Room newsletter or submit episode suggestions at crimeroompodcast.com. That's crimeroompodcast.com. Find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Crime Room is narrated by X. Additional voicing by Matthew O'Reilly Kavanagh. This episode was written by Jasmine Isaacson. Produced by Rachel McDermott. Mixed and scored by Andrew Lynn. The Crime Room theme song is by Sarah Sherlock.